Honorable Lolot, you have told us that you have not been a traditional judicial officer, in your own words, quoting you. The IEBC chairperson is expected to have a legal background, which you have. So now please tell us, as a judicial officer, how have you contributed or been involved in elections or any electoral matters? And while at it, tell us what has been your major contribution to the electoral processes in Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Kituku. I have handled, like I said, 2 election disputes, and they were election offences. And there were serious election offences that were the results of which were being awaited by the Supreme Court so that they can make a determination on a gubernatorial issue. And in the process of going through this election dispute that I handled, I was able to find gaps in the IEBC processes. For example, it was evident to me that those people who were charged before me, some of whom were IEBC officials, had one or two of them had been charged because they had forgotten and put every document inside the ballot box, so the ballot box could not be opened. There are documents that they are not supposed to put in the ballot box. So some had placed everything in the ballot box, and that raised suspicion that this ballot box is needed now to be reopened so that those things could be removed. And the suspicion on the candidate that lost was that this was intentional, and that there was stuffing of ballots, so that there was no scrutiny of the unused ballot papers. I think from here, I was able to find out that fatigue is a critical issue that affects election processes, and somehow IEBC as an institution has to create a policy on how they relate to this issue of fatigue during the electioneering process. Secondly, like I said, I was selected as one of the trainers by the Judiciary Committee on Elections to train my colleagues, and through a team we were able to train our colleagues in the preparedness for election. When I was Secretary General of the Kenya Magistrate and Judges Association, this was between the year 2009 and 2013. And in the year 2009, there was a petition. There were petitions that were ongoing from the 2007 election cycle. And from this cycle, we were able to note that one of our judges, Justice now President of the Court of Appeal, Justice Musinga, was able to handle a petition in Kisii within 6 months. And then we said, if it can be done, then it's something that we are able now to create the timelines for it and then make proposals for it. So this is how, as a Kenya Magistrate and Judges Association, we are now able to now drive the effort that our colleagues and every one of us is able to conclude election petitions within 6 months. Secondly, I forgot to mention that I was representing the judiciary during the writing of the Constitution. The Committee of Experts needed to consult with a group called the Reference Group, which incorporated professional bodies and other bodies of interest to the country, like TSC and others. So, the National Union of Teachers and others. And in this process, when writing this constitution and those aspects on the election, I was able to make the contribution, having gone back to my electorate, which is the Kenya Magistrate and Judges Association, and finding out their views on how the election process should be and whether processes can be concluded within certain timelines. And I think that is the contribution I've made, and possibly now it's my opportunity to make even bigger contribution. Thank you, Madam Chair.
What is that you call bigger contribution?
There are bigger contributions to be made in this institution in the sense that there are recommendations that were made by the Supreme Court in the last election cycle, and part of that is concerning timelines, how we are able now to negotiate these timelines and create greater period. Because when we were writing the first Supreme Court rules, election rules, to try and balance these timelines of 14 days was very difficult. How then are we going to give parties time to file their documents within which the time frame for filing documents, and ensuring that by the time the petition is ripe for hearing, there is sufficient time? And you would see that the Supreme Court is always caught up by time. That's why they have to hear cases late into the night. And we are all glued, and I think the tension in the country is even much there's gripping and much more difficult. Of course, there are those who enjoy the sessions, but I think it's important that the Supreme Court is given sufficient time. So one of those would be that timeline. The second one would be the corporate governance of the IEBC, how we are able now to ensure that it has a face for itself, that it's able to have internal processes that are able to deal with internal issues and also to create better ways of doing business as IEBC internally, and how the commissioners relate with each other, how the commission relates with staff, how commission relates with the players within the sector, that also the stakeholders, and then how does the commission then relate with major stakeholders like Parliament and the executive.
Fair enough. Thank you. Madam Koki, kindly please do ask your questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning again, Mheshimiwa Lorot.
Good morning, Madam Koki.
And welcome
Thank you.
today. The Kriegler report made some recommendations on the reform of the IEBC, or the election management body in Kenya. And I would like to ask you a small question related to that. First, what were the various recommendations, just a few, one or two, that are key to strengthen the IEBC, if you believe that IEBC requires some reforms now? Thank you.
Thank you. The Kriegler report, also called IREC, I think one of the major recommendations it made was on the functions of the IEBC. First, that it must be captured in a separate statute on its own. I think that time was before the promulgation of the Constitution. It must have a separate, and then to consolidate all the electoral laws into one. And then also it talked about the corporate governance of IEBC and whether their business should only be conducted through committees, whether we can merge that type of business so that now you have greater strength in terms of how you approach elections. They also talked about stricter timelines, stricter observance of timelines. They talked about having a media strategy so that it's not just because the election that were announced, so that Kriegler's committee were to review, announced by KBC, and then there was a shutdown on other media houses, and I think those are some of the contributors to what we saw as the 2007 election violence.